Don't play dumb. You think I don't know what's going on? You people steal uniforms all the time. You don't look like any doctor I've ever seen. Imagine a cop who insults a black man on the street, not knowing that man is a doctor. Minutes later, when tragedy strikes, this officer learns the hardest, most painful lesson of his life. Stick around, because this story will leave you speechless. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to support us by subscribing to the channel. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. It was a rainy evening in downtown Atlanta. Dr. Marcus Hale had just finished his shift at the hospital, 12 exhausting hours of saving lives. He walked out in his scrubs, his stethoscope still hanging loosely around his neck, heading toward his car parked across the street. But before he could reach it, flashing red and blue lights cut across the dark. A patrol car screeched to a stop. Out stepped Officer Reynolds, a man known on the streets for his arrogance and quick temper. He was the kind of cop who thought the badge gave him the right to judge anyone, especially people who didn't look like him. "Hey you," Reynolds barked, slamming the car door. "What do you think you're doing around here dressed like that?" Marcus froze, confused. "Excuse me." Reynolds took a slow, menacing step closer. His eyes narrowed on Marcus's hospital badge. "Don't play dumb. You think I don't know what's going on? You people steal uniforms all the time. You don't look like any doctor I've ever seen." The words cut deep. "You people." Marcus clenched his jaw, steadying his breath. He had heard this before, too many times. But coming from a man who was supposed to protect and serve, it stung worse. "I just finished my shift," Marcus said calmly. "I work at Grady Memorial. Here's my ID." But Reynolds didn't even glance at it. Instead, he scoffed. "Save it. You expect me to believe that you, some kid off the street, got yourself through med school? Don't insult me." The silence that followed was heavy. The rain tapped against the pavement, thunder rumbling in the distance. Marcus lowered his eyes for a moment, then looked straight into Reynolds's face. Calm. Unshaken. "I don't need your approval to know who I am," he said softly. "And one day, you might regret speaking to me like this." Reynolds sneered. "Yeah, right. The only thing I'll regret is wasting my time here." He waved dismissively, climbing back into his cruiser. "Stay out of trouble, Doc. His voice dripped with mockery. Marcus walked to his car, fighting to let the words roll off him. But deep down, he couldn't shake the weight of that encounter. He had saved lives today, white, black, rich, poor, young, old. It didn't matter. To him, every life mattered. But to Officer Reynolds, Marcus's life was just another target for his prejudice. And then, fate struck back. Just minutes later, as Marcus pulled out of the parking lot, the same patrol car roared past him, speeding wildly. The screech of tires, the shattering of glass, a deafening crash. Marcus slammed on his brakes. His heart pounded as he jumped out. There, twisted in the middle of the intersection, was Officer Reynolds's cruiser, smashed into a pole, the hood crumpled like paper. And inside, Reynolds, barely conscious, blood streaming down his forehead, his chest heaving in shallow, desperate breaths. Marcus froze for a split second, the irony crashing down on him like a tidal wave. The very man who had mocked him, who had called him too dumb and unfit to be a doctor, was now clinging to life. And Marcus? He was the only one who could save him. The world seemed to stop. People gathered, some shouting for help, others pulling out their phones to record. But Marcus knew there was no time to waste. He rushed forward, pulling open the mangled car door with all his strength. "Stay with me, officer," he said firmly, slipping into his training instinct. "I'm a doctor. You're going to be okay." Reynolds's eyes fluttered open, bloodshot and weak. His lips trembled. And for the first time that night, there was no arrogance, no mockery, only fear. "Help me, please," he whispered, voice breaking. The same man who had insulted Marcus minutes earlier was now begging for his mercy. And in that moment, Marcus had a choice: walk away and let karma finish its work, or rise above the hate, and do what he had sworn to do, save lives, no matter whose. He pressed his hands against Reynolds's wound, shouting for bystanders to call an ambulance. "You're not dying tonight. Not on my watch." The crowd gasped, some whispering in disbelief. Wasn't this the same cop who had just harassed him? Marcus's hands worked fast, steady, unshaken. Every heartbeat mattered. Every breath Reynolds struggled to take was a reminder of how fragile life really was. And yet, in the back of his mind, Marcus couldn't ignore the bitter truth. Reynolds had looked at him and seen nothing but color. But now Reynolds' very survival depended on the man he had dismissed as too dumb to be a doctor. The same cop who mocked Marcus is now fighting for his life, with Marcus as his only hope. But what happens when Reynolds survives? Will this near-death experience change his heart, or will his prejudice run even deeper? You'll want to hear what happens next. What happens when the man you disrespected not only saves your life but then holds the power to shape your future? Officer Reynolds thought he was untouchable, but fate had other plans. This is where justice, irony, and redemption collide. The ambulance wailed through the storm, rushing Officer Reynolds into the ER. But the truth was undeniable: if Marcus hadn't stepped in, Reynolds wouldn't have made it that far. Hours later, Reynolds woke up in a hospital bed, his chest bound, IVs snaking into his arms. The first face he saw wasn't a nurse, wasn't another officer, but Marcus. Standing calmly at the foot of his bed, arms folded, his stethoscope glinting under the fluorescent lights. Reynolds blinked, disoriented. Then his pride flared. You did this?" Marcus didn't flinch. His tone was steady, professional. "Yes, you're alive because I was there." The silence that followed was deafening. Reynolds looked away, ashamed but too stubborn to admit it. His mind replayed every word he had spat earlier. "You don't look like any doctor I've ever seen," and now those same words burned like acid in his throat. But Marcus didn't gloat, didn't mock. He simply said, "Rest. You'll need time to heal." Over the next few days, the irony deepened. Reynolds couldn't avoid Marcus, because Marcus was now his attending physician. Every morning, Marcus walked in with quiet confidence, checking vitals, adjusting medication, ensuring Reynolds' recovery. And every morning, Reynolds felt the weight of his own hypocrisy crushing him. The man he had called unfit to be a doctor was the very reason he was breathing. But the true moment of reckoning came 1 week later. A press conference was called by the hospital, a way to honor Marcus for his heroic actions saving a life outside his official shift. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, and staff applauded. What Reynolds didn't expect was that his story would be front and center. Dr. Marcus Hale stepped up to the podium, calm, collected, his voice carrying both grace and power. "On that night, I wasn't just a doctor," Marcus said, glancing briefly toward Reynolds in the crowd. "I was a black man, questioned and insulted for simply existing. But when tragedy struck, I had a choice: walk away, or live by the oath I swore, to save lives, no matter whose. I chose the latter, because hate will never heal this world. Only humanity will." The room fell silent. Cameras clicked. Some staff wiped away tears. And Reynolds, his face burned with humiliation, because everyone knew, the world now knew, his arrogance, his prejudice, had been exposed under the brightest spotlight. But justice wasn't finished. A week later, Reynolds was called into the chief's office. His body still sore, his pride still shattered. The chief's face was grave. "Reynolds, we've had complaints about your conduct before, but now, after what happened with Dr. Hale, it's not just rumor anymore. It's fact. And it's public." Reynolds' stomach dropped. His career, the badge he thought made him untouchable, was crumbling. "You're suspended," the chief said firmly, "pending review. And honestly, I don't see a way back from this." For the first time in years, Reynolds had no power, no authority, only shame. But here's where the twist of fate cut the deepest. Because later that same day, Reynolds was discharged from the hospital. And the man assigned to sign his final release papers, the one who had the authority to declare him fit to leave, was Marcus. Reynolds sat in the chair, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. His voice cracked. I don't know what to say." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Then finally spoke. "You don't need to thank me. Just, be better. The next person you look down on might not have a reason to help you." Reynolds swallowed hard. His chest tightened. It wasn't just the physical pain, it was the crushing truth that Marcus had risen higher by choosing compassion, while Reynolds had sunk lower by choosing hate. As Reynolds signed his paperwork and prepared to leave, the hallway buzzed with chatter. Staff members passed, some whispering. The once feared officer now walked with his head bowed low, carrying not authority, but the weight of disgrace. And Marcus? He stood tall, not just as a doctor, but as a man who had turned prejudice into proof. Proof that character outshines hate. Proof that dignity conquers cruelty. But the story doesn't end there. Because weeks later, a shocking twist would bring Marcus and Reynolds face to face again. But this time, the stakes would be even higher. Marcus saved Reynolds' life once, but what happens when their paths cross again under even more dangerous circumstances? Can a man truly change? Or will hate find a way to resurface? Stay tuned, because the next chapter might just leave you questioning everything.